1942, an African-American gentleman by the name of Raymond V joined an elite group of black men known as the Tuskegee Airmen. A few months earlier, the United States had been plunged into a global conflict known as World War II. Simultaneously, African Americans were waging a war for acceptance into the racist and segregated military. These men fought for the opportunity to prove that they had the skills to become the best. Along with their fight for acceptance into the military, the Tuskegee Airmen bore the weight of African American status in society on their shoulders. The circumstances of the day allowed for a narrow window of opportunity for a select group of black men to face down the global enemy, and in turn inspire a president, a race, and a nation to confront the domestic enemy and racial discrimination.
Well, I think that African Americans had a long history of responding to battle, starting from the Civil War, Crispus Attucks, the 9th and 10th Cavalry in the charge of San Juan Hill, the Buffalo Soldiers. They all served with honor and distinction.
In previous wars and conflicts, African Americans were considered second-class citizens based on the separate but equal doctrine. By the end of the 1930s, blacks were no longer willing to deal with being put down socially and used the military as a vehicle for their protests, voicing their objection to the discriminatory treatment and segregation. Due to the strong efforts of black organizations and the media, the federal government was urged to take action. In 1940, President Franklin D. Roosevelt ordered the Army Air Corps to build an all-Negro flying unit. The African American community viewed this as their opportunity to prove themselves worthy of being just as good as any other man in America. But in reality, they had to be twice as good as the white man to succeed. Although the NAACP and other black organizations were determined not to accept any kind of segregation, they had to admit that Tuskegee was, nonetheless, an opportunity for the black man to fly.
In September 1940, Congress passed an amendment to the Selective Training and Services Act. Many African Americans answered the call for various reasons. One man in particular, Raymond V, was eager to serve his country.
We wanted to fly like everyone else. And the situation in World War II is the entire world was at war. It was 160 nations. Food was rationed. This was no Iraq. Food was rationed. We had 5,000 people get killed a day on one island. And so since it's my country, I stood up.
The training was rigorous, and only the best of the best would succeed. The Army made it very difficult for the Tuskegee trainees to pass the test. The black cadets were given 15 weeks of primary training.
We went through the standard basic Army training. First they tested us for our intelligence. Then, of course, they helped make the assignments based upon our intelligence. And then we began the rigorous training in mathematics, and through the mechanical arts in terms of the engines, the motors, meteorology, because we had to figure when we were flying what effect the weather was going to have and what is subject to happen.
The first class to graduate in 1942 consisted of 5 people, while the second only had 3 to graduate.
They didn't want us to succeed. In fact, the first class was 5 people, and the second graduated 3 people. And we laughed when we talked about that because they were saying that we passed too many the first time, so we're not going to pass that the second time.
However, by 1946, 992 pilots had graduated from Tuskegee. Before the trainees could even touch a real plane, they had to learn their flight manuals from cover to cover to ensure safe flying and operational efficiency. Trainees spent hours learning flight maneuvers in a Link trainer, which was a little more than a plywood box. The men were also taught to understand the mechanical aspects of their planes. Detailed records were kept, documenting the progress of each flight student, similar to a report card. In addition to their academic grades, pilots received pink slips for any offense of the rules. 3 pink slips meant expulsion from the program.
The facilities provided by the military were the bare minimum. The airfield built at Tuskegee Institute consisted of 2 grass landing strips and accommodated 8 planes, all at the cost of $22,900. Houses weren't built until June 1941. The 13 classes that came before were housed on the campus of Tuskegee Institute. Their barracks was the old bathhouse at the renovated Phelps Hall, and they ate their meals in a private dining room at Tompkins Hall.
Facilities were standard Army barracks. Where we ran into segregation on it was the fact that we were a separate army. Instead of going to the officers' club where it was all nice, and cozy, we had to just get some barracks and put some chairs in there and say, "This is your club."
The military believed that African Americans were not mentally capable of flying. Thus, the planes that the Tuskegee Airmen flew were substandard. The pilots perfected their skills in the P-40 planes that they were provided. The plane was slower, but easy to maneuver. Because the pilots became so accurate, they were banned from practice to save targets. The servicemen also perfected their skills changing engines in 1/3 of the required time. They had to be the best. Although African Americans were becoming closer to reaching their goal to fly, segregation and discrimination of American society stood in their way. The first black unit to see battle was the 99th Fighter Squadron. They were shipped to Morocco. The first real combat they faced was June 9, 1943, on a bomber escort to Pantelleria. The squadron performed under the leadership of Lieutenant Colonel Davis until September, when he was ordered to take command of the 332nd Fighter Group. From the 96th Air Service Group, Haysbert joined the 332nd Fighter Group and was shipped out to Bari, Italy. The 99th and 332nd fought in over 200 missions and lost very few bombers. 450 pilots served overseas in either the 99th or 332nd. The airmen destroyed over 260 enemy aircraft, sank 1 enemy destroyer, and demolished numerous enemy installations. Several aviators died in combat. The airmen became known as the Red Tail Angels, for they painted the tails and noses of their planes red, and rarely lost any bombers. Bomber groups often asked for the Red Tail escorts, not knowing that they were black.
The airmen not only served their country valiantly against the Axis powers, but also served their race by overcoming the adversity of segregation in a racist military in America. In February 1948, President Truman sent recommendations from military leaders and his Civil Rights Committee as a proposed civil rights bill. This was very controversial to Southern legislators. Congress refused to act on the bill. On July 26, 1948, President Truman invoked his power as Commander-in-Chief by issuing Executive Order 9981, which stated, "There shall be equality of treatment and opportunity for all persons in the armed forces without regard to race, color, religion, or national origin."
The Tuskegee Airmen succeeded in breaking the color barrier in the military. After the war, blacks and whites were afforded the GI Bill, in which they could enhance their education. Thus, many men, such as Raymond Haysbert, pursued graduate studies at institutions such as Morgan State University, Johns Hopkins University, and University of Baltimore, and went on to become a successful businessman. His experience in the military prepared him for his future in the corporate world. These men had set the standard for their race. Ray Haysbert and the other Tuskegee Airmen proved to be role models to future reformers in the ensuing decades. But most of all, these men succeeded in proving to our president, a race, and a nation that black men can fly.